Kלים, Perik, Yud Zayin, Mishnah Tesvov. And we've finished with all the Mishnahs dealing with Shiurim, etc. Now we're going back to Mesechta Kלים itself. Says the Mishnah, Oise Kli Kibul Mikol Mokem Tomei. We've had the term Kli Kibul. Remember that those materials that have to be a Kli Kibul in order to be Mekabel Tumah are eights, of course, wood is the standard one, and oir, and begodim we'll see later on, they have to have a Kli Kibul. We've never discussed how big a Kibul does it have to have. Says the Mishnah, how is a Kli Kibul Mikol Moken Tomei? Even if it's made to be Mekabel, then even if it's just made to be Mekabel a Mashahu, there's no shear, in other words, to the concept of Kibul, Tomei. Similarly, we've mentioned Mishka v'Moshav before, and just to recap, a Mishka v'Moshav again is a Kli made out of wood or oil or even metal. And the Mishka v'Moshav actually incorporates two chumras. One is that in the case of eights and oil, which normally would need to have a Kli Kibul, as we just mentioned, if the Kli is made for Mishka v'Moshav, i.e. it's made for lying and sitting on, it's Kli haroy in Mishka v'Moshav, then we dispense with the rule of needing a Kli Kibul, i.e. for instance a chair, although a chair does not have a Kibul, because it's made for Mishka v'Moshav, the chair is Mekabel Tumah. Similarly, the second chumrah for Mishka v'Moshav is that when you have a Mishka v'Moshav, then the Zov and the Nida and the Yeledes and the Zova that are able to be Metame through Mishka v'Moshav, known as Tumas Medras, when they sit or put their body weight on this Kli, the Kli becomes an Av HaTumah. Normally an Av HaTumah makes the Mekabel, the Kli, into a Rishon. In the case of Mishka v'Moshav, it becomes an Av HaTumah itself, like the Zov and the Zova. Says the Mishnah, Ois Mishka v'Moshav Mikol Mokem Tomei. Wherever the Mishka v'Moshav, there's no shear to it, as long as it's a Kli, made for the purpose of Mishka v'Moshav, even if it's tiny, as long as it's made for sitting on, or for putting your body weight on, leaning on it, suspending yourself on it, that's enough, it's Tomei. You make a pouch from oir hamatzah, literally, just like an oir is normally a piece of leather which is worked, it's salted, it's put flour in it, you treat it with tanning agents, i.e. tannic acid. A matzah, just like a matzah, is a very rudimentary form of bread, it's just flour and water. Oir, which has not been properly treated, in other words, it hasn't had the moliach, the kamiach and the offits, the work with salt and flour and with tannic acid. It's just kept as it is. It's called like a matzah, oir hamatzah. If you make a pouch from an oir hamatzah, then it is still tomei under the rules of kli oir. An oir which is ma'ubad, which has been worked, is a material which doesn't now need a machshava to turn it into a material royal mekabel tumah. As soon as you make a kli from worked leather, it's mekabel tumah under the rules of kli oir. However, with oir hamatzah, you need a conscious decision to say, this is it, I'm not going to work this leather anymore. As soon as you make that conscious decision, the matzah then, the oir hamatzah becomes like normal oir, and making a kli from it becomes a regular kli oir, and it is tomei. Similarly, min hanior. Nior is paper. We've had this before. Paper itself, although it's made from eights and grasses and wood pulp, has a then of kli eight. However, just regular piece of paper is not a kli kibble. If you make a pouch from paper in order to be mekabel something, then it's mekabel tumah. This is in contrast, making kelim from materials, but it's not going to last long. It's going to be einoi kayama. If it's not a davar shel kayama, then it's not mekabel tumah. Paper, normally you make a pouch or a box out of paper, hoping it'll last some time, therefore it's a kli kibble. And the Mishnah finishes off with a very important din. Horimoin ha'aloin v'ha'egois. Rimoin is a pomegranate. You actually have a pomegranate, and it comes from a tree, therefore it could be a kli eitz. If you hollow out the inside of a pomegranate, you can make a kli kibble. Similarly, aloin. Aloin is normally an oak tree. We're talking about something called gall apples. A gall apple is something which grows on the bark of an oak tree. It's a little sort of, there are acids in there, chemicals, but it's actually like a little ball, and you can actually scrape out, hollow out the inside and have a little kli. Similarly, an ego is a nut. You take out the nut and you have your nut shell. Shechakokum hatinoikus, and children hollow these things out. Lomud behemes offer to use to measure earth or sand. Or they prepared them, got them ready to be used on a scale as a balance. Then Tommy. Now this Mishnah is not primarily telling us the din of tinoikus, that children have an ability to create a kli which is makabel tumah. As the Mishnah ends off, sheyesh len ma'aseh, children have the ability to create a kli with their actions, by doing something. But va'ein he machshava, they haven't got the ability to create a kli by machshava. Let's explain. This Mishnah actually comes somewhere else, comes in Machshirin, and that's the main place. This Mishnah isn't really coming to tell us the dinim of children, but it's telling us the dinim of the rimon and the alon and egois, in contrast to other fruits, other kelim made from leaves and peels and shells, which are not called bar kayama. They're not going to last long, therefore they're not makabel tumah. However, if you make a kli from a rimon and an alon and an egois, that's called the dover shel kayama, and the kli is makabel tumah. It's normally children that play around and make kelim out of these things. That's why the Mishnah sticks on the din of the children, and it tells us that children can only create a kli, which is makabel tumah, only if they actually do a maaseh. They create the kli with their hands. But ein hemachshava, an adult can actually, for instance, if you find a hollowed out piece of wood in the forest, it's not a kli. Nobody's made it. If an adult were to pick that up and say, "Oh, I would like to use this as a kli," his machshava that he wants to use this as a kli turns it into a kli. But a child doesn't have that ability. The child only has a capability of maaseh, not able to create a kli alidei machshava. So we've got two things in the Mishnah, two options we've seen. One is the child actually makes the kli. One is he picks up a hollowed kli and thinks about it. What about neither? He finds a kli with a dent in it, with a hole in it, and he doesn't create it, but actually uses it for the medida. Doesn't actually create it. This is halfway between the maaseh mentioned and the machshava, which we said is no good. That sort of maaseh is a machlokes in the Rishonim. It's quite a big sugya. Tosfos Yom Tov already refers us to that sugya. Two more Mishnayos left on this long perek. So we'll start.